Chapter 14. The Persistent Woman. "Is this where you live?" asked the lady brightly as they drew up beside Laurie. Laurie nodded. "Won't you change your mind and let me buy you a new doll?" asked the lady. "No, thank you," said Laurie, turning away. Hattie was standing on the porch. "I've got to go now," cried Laurie, and abandoning the cart, she grabbed Annie and ran to the shelter of Lilac Valley. "Who are those people?" asked Hattie, who was watching from the door. "I don't know," said Laurie. "I hope they go away." "They are," said Hattie. "They're leaving." At dinner, Laurie told Hattie and Henry about her adventures of the morning. Said Henry. "Very interesting. I think you should play right here in the yard for the next few days." Laurie was playing with Annie in the bitty stove on the front steps the next morning when the long cream-colored car turned into the drive. "Good morning," called the lady. "Is your mother at home?" "No," said Laurie, clutching Annie closely. "All alone, then?" asked the lady as she moved in a familiar manner up the path. "No," said Laurie, bracing herself against the step. "Oh, what an adorable little stove!" she squealed. "Oh, where did you get the little stove?" "It's not mine," said Laurie, looking frightened. "And whose is it, may I ask?" said the lady, who by this time had settled herself on the top step. The young man stood by, looking at the house. "And with whom do you have business here?" said Hattie from the doorway. The woman stood up. "Good morning," she said less brightly. "I was just talking to your little girl here." "Any business with Laurie shall be handled through me," said Hattie, glaring at the pair. Maybe your little girl would like to sell us her doll for enough to buy a new one," said the man. "That's for her to say," said Hattie. "Oh, Hattie, I wouldn't sell Annie for anything. You know that." "Then that's your answer," said Hattie to the strangers. "Anything else you want to know?" "The little stove," said the lady hesitantly. "Would you sell that?" "It's not hers to sell," replied Hattie, "but I can say it's not for sale." "The doll," said the woman again. "I'll pay $25 for it." "Humph," said Hattie. "I've got better business to do right now. Come, Laurie, but if you want to come back tomorrow, we'll talk it over here." Hattie and Henry talked at length about the visitors. "They have a mighty uncanny interest in that doll," said Hattie. "If they offer $25 for it, it must be worth twice that much. They must be collectors who were at the sale." Henry didn't say anything for a long time. "Hattie, you'll have to wash up the dishes by yourself, maybe do the milking too," he said. "Laurie and I are going to make a trip to Newfane. We're going to the museum there to find out what's so special about this doll. I always set a lot of store by books and museums and the like. Let's get armed with learning, Laurie, and we'll get to the bottom of this." Chapter 15. Queen Anne. Laurie and Auction Annie and Henry bumped down the road in the truck to the paved highway, and then on for miles to the town of Newfane. "We are here," said Henry, climbing out in front of a red brick building. "There are people who say that museums and historical societies and the like have no practical use. Now we'll see." There was a gray-haired lady seated at a desk inside. Henry took off his hat. "I'm Henry Hardwick, from up at Lilac Valley," he said, "and this is my little girl Laurie. We need some information." "How do you do?" said the lady, looking pleasantly at the pair. "What kind of information?" "About dolls," said Henry. Laurie held out Annie so the lady could see her. "We want to know if there is anything very special about her," said Laurie. "She's certainly very old," said the lady, taking Annie into her hands. "Where did you get her?" "Found her in a bag of rags," replied Henry. "We have a few old dolls in the museum," said the lady, "but they aren't like this one." Laurie looked around the big room at the old samplers, furniture, dishes, pictures, guns, and clocks, and went over to examine two old dolls which were lying in quaint old doll cradles. "Here's a doll like one of those at the auction," said Laurie. But there were no dolls like Annie. "I have a book about dolls here," said the lady, searching inside the bookcase beside her. "That might help us." The book wasn't there. "Oh, now I remember," said the lady. "Someone borrowed the book. Since the doll sale, several people have asked for books, but I'll ask her to bring it back. Could you come back tomorrow?" "I don't see how we can come back again," said Henry. "I can't spare the time this season of the year." Henry and Laurie walked away slowly toward the truck. A lady stepped out of a car just as they reached the street. "Hello, Mr. Hardwick," she said in surprise. "Why, it's Mrs. Pinkerton," said Henry. "I didn't expect to see you down here. This is Laurie, our summer fresh air girl." "You are a very lucky girl," said Mrs. Pinkerton, smiling at Laurie. "I know it," said Laurie, and for the first time she grasped Henry's hand and smiled up at him. "For goodness sake, what are you doing, playing with that doll?" gasped Mrs. Pinkerton. "She's mine," said Laurie, drawing closer to Henry and grasping Annie tightly. Where did you get her? Where did she come from?" asked Mrs. Pinkerton, leaning over Laurie. "You can trust Mrs. Pinkerton, Laurie," said Henry. "I've known her for years. She's the finest summer person in Windham County. That's what we're here for, Mrs. Pinkerton, to find out about this doll." "Let's go in," said Mrs. Pinkerton. "I'm supposed to help in there this afternoon." Laurie and Henry followed Mrs. Pinkerton back into the museum. "Hello," said Mrs. Pinkerton to the lady at the desk. "I've brought my friends back." "Now," she said, turning to Laurie, "tell me all about this doll." Then Laurie told her how she had bought Auction Annie in a bag of rags at the Everett auction, and how the strange people had followed her about trying to buy the doll from her. "We figure it must be a valuable doll," said Henry. "Those folks want this doll so much she must be something special." "She is something special," said Mrs. Pinkerton. "I learned a lot about dolls when I worked as a volunteer in here last summer. Someone exhibited a doll collection here, and her most valuable doll was just like this one. I was interested because I thought she was such a sweet-looking doll." "Just like Annie?" asked Laurie. "Well, very much like Annie. I think I can say without hesitation that this is a Queen Anne doll. That means she was made in the reign of Queen Anne of England, long before the American Revolution. Some little girl probably brought this doll on a sailing ship from England when her family came to America to settle." "Oh my!" gasped Laurie, looking at Annie in awe. "And you call her a Queen Anne? I named her Auction Annie because that somehow fitted her. Now she's Queen Anne." "How valuable is she?" asked Henry. "In dollars and cents, I mean." "I believe the value of the doll was placed at $250, said Mrs. Pinkerton. "I remember there was some extra insurance carried on her during the exhibit." $250! exclaimed Henry with a little whistle. "But of course there aren't too many people who are interested in buying such an expensive and rare doll, just rich doll collectors. I don't like the tactics of those people who are trying to buy your doll, but maybe they'll be willing to pay your price," said Mrs. Pinkerton thoughtfully. "But I wouldn't sell Annie, Queen Annie, for anything," said Laurie simply. "Would we, Henry?" And Laurie hugged Annie lovingly. On the ride back to Lilac Valley, Henry was even quieter than usual. Laurie looked at Annie with new awe and affection, trying to imagine the little English girl who might have brought her in her arms as she rocked over the sea on her way to a new world. Finally, Henry broke the silence. "Laurie, do you realize how much $250 is? Do you know what it will buy?" "No, I don't think I ever saw $250, said Laurie. "Probably not," said Henry dryly. "Oh, Henry, do you think I ought to sell Annie?" asked Laurie dismally. "She's your doll," said Henry, "but if you can sell her for that much money, well, the way it looks to me, she's too expensive for a plaything."